basically teach the fundamentals of finance. I'll talk a little bit more about my story, but over the years, I've come to work with a lot of realtors simply because in my industry, you network, and realtors, mortgage brokers, CPAs are the type of people I run into all the time. So I'm going to talk more specifically. We're going to go through some of the concepts in the book here, in the How Money Works. For those online, I think there's a PDF sent out. I did not send this out, but I can get a copy of this out so that you can send it to them as well. But to back up, tell my story a little bit. I actually been doing this 10 years. I got into the business of financial advising and so on, because probably about 2 years prior to that, so 2014 I started, about 2 years prior to that, I had a conversation with my wife, said we can do better financially. We made good money, had a corporate job, she worked full time. But we had debt, we weren't saving much money. I had no clue where I stood for retirement. So I started researching, reading books, getting in touch with people, listening to podcasts. I found out real quick that I didn't learn any of this stuff in school. They didn't teach it to me. And I don't know about you guys, but I went to Dover, down in York County. We bounced a checkbook one time in home economics. That was all we did. That's the only thing financial we did. So my parents never taught it to me. So we started implementing these fundamentals. We got out of debt within 2 years. We saved a big emergency fund. We got on track to retire early if we wanted to, all by just following simple fundamentals. And I told my wife I would teach this to people for free. My corporate job, I knew I wasn't going to be there forever. I kind of hit the ceiling. So we laid out a plan for me to start a business. I went and got my licenses, got connected with a mentor, and the rest is history. I love what I do because I get to teach people exactly what we did to be financially successful. Now, the bulk of my business at this point is the investment world. That I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to the market. That's what I enjoy. I actually do it for fun on the side. I study the market. So, but I do holistic financial planning. And I'll have cards I'll pass out to you guys. One thing that's in your booklet, if you have questions throughout today, I know this environment might not be the place to ask personal questions, but there is an interest form where you can fill out if there's a reason that you would want to get together or questions that you have, or even if you want to put comments at the bottom, what was the good, the bad, and the ugly about the workshop, because I always like to improve on it. So I'm going to start out with the How Money Works book. And really what I want to do is kind of walk through, and if you guys have questions at any time, you can feel free to stop me. You don't need to wait till the end. I want to make sure I'm explaining things clearly. I'm not moving too fast. I tend to be a fast talker, so if I talk too fast, you can raise your hand and say slow it down a little bit. You won't offend me. But if you go to page 5, the top that says pay yourself first. A couple of concepts that I want to talk about here is pay yourself first. So one of the biggest issues in our country right now, or just culture, is debt. So I sit down with clients a lot of time that have a decent amount of debt, plus you're paying money to Uncle Sam and all that stuff. And we'll actually lay it out and say, you're working into Wednesday. If they work a 40-hour week, you're working into Wednesday till you earn any money for yourself, because it's sometimes Thursday because they're paying debt, they're paying their mortgage, some's coming out for taxes. And basically what ends up happening is you kind of work forever for somebody else. And so paying yourself first is making sure that you set money aside every single month that's going towards your future, no matter what the situation is. And if I have extras down underneath, if someone doesn't mind, grab right underneath the table there, they can pass out anyone else that comes in. But paying yourself first, making sure there's money set aside no matter what. Time is, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but time is your greatest tool when it comes to investing. So the sooner you do it, the better. The next one is know your financial independence number. Has anyone ever heard that term, financial independence number? So what that is the amount of money you need the day you retire to never work again and not outlive your money. Now you guys, is everyone here a realtor? Okay. So being in that space of real estate for the rest of your life, if you retire, if someone comes to you and says, can you list my house? You're probably going to list the house. And most of the realtor clients that I have, even into retirement, they're still doing something. So it's a little bit different for you guys, and I won't get into that today. But the financial independence number says if you stopped working, how much money do you need to never work again and not outlive your money? In today's day and age, unfortunately, we used to talk of retirement as a three-legged stool: Social Security, pension, and personal savings. Now, most people, unless you're probably 50, 55 and above, I don't include Social Security in the outlook. I don't trust it. It'll be insolvent sometime between 2035 and 2050. And pensions are a dinosaur. I don't run into them unless you work for the state or you're a teacher or something like that. So most people are going to have to personally save assets to be able to retire and not work for the rest of their life. So knowing that number is important. Zig Ziglar, if anyone's ever heard of Zig Ziglar, he has a quote that says, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. So if you do not know what that number is, I'm not saying you can't get there, but it's going to be harder. Flipping to the next page, probably the most important thing, especially for young people coming out of college. So I get referred to a lot of my clients, grandkids and kids that are coming out of college or high school, is avoiding the credit trap. More specifically, credit cards and things like that, revolving open-ended debt. I'll talk more about that later, but again, it's one of the biggest issues in our country. Does anyone know how much we pay in interest on our debt right now as a country? We actually borrow $1 trillion a year just to pay the interest on our debt. So we're adding $1 trillion of debt every year to the government is just to pay their interest. So if I laid out what the government's doing, and I do this sometimes with some of my clients where I'll take a few, well, actually in their case, a lot of zeros off and make it look like a household and say, where do you think this household's going to end up? Most people are like bankruptcy, and that's really what the case is. It just can't sustain. And I can answer any questions on that. I don't mind getting a little political because it's a real thing. I don't get too political, but it's we just can't sustain it where we're going. So avoiding debt is huge because you want money earning interest for you, not for someone else. And last but not least is set a goal and have a plan. I mean, it's just natural. So if we flip to page 9, 3 main accounts that I recommend that everybody has. Doesn't matter who you are, if you're saving and investing for your future or just putting money aside, you should have 3 accounts. The first one is the emergency account. Liquid money sit in a savings, a money market, something like that. That's liquid if something comes up. How many in here have kids? How many have pets? So I have both. At some point, they're going to break something. They're going to eat something they shouldn't, flush something down the toilet, and have the money on hand, liquid cash, is going to be very important. A quick story that firsthand. So my son's 5. So it's probably about 2 months before he was born. I was going to bed, just laid down in bed. My wife was in the master bathroom, and she said, "Nate, there's like a little pile of dirt in here." And I'm like, I'm thinking in my head, a pile of dirt in the world. So I walk in, and on like the sill, we had like wainscoting around. On the sill was a little pile of dirt. You ever seen those excavating ants? That's what it looked like. So I'm like, that looks like ants. So I'm looking around and there's a little wet. So I reached out and touched it. When I touched it, it cracked and all these ants started blowing out. So my wife is almost 9 months pregnant. And so I run out to the garage. I get a can of Raid that I have in the garage. And one of those deals where it was like, it was done. So I was like, oh, shoot. So I had to run to Giant, get some. Anyway, we took care of it. That turned into a leak in the roof, mold in the wall, a total roof replacement. Basically, I had to tear all the drywall, mold remediation, all that sort of stuff. I had to cut a very large check right before my son was born, but we had an emergency fund. I literally wrote the check. I didn't have to take out debt. I didn't have to do a home equity line of credit. It was paid for. It was done. He came. Everything was good to go. I didn't like writing the check, but that's what the emergency fund is for. The downside of the emergency fund is you're not going to make any money off of it. It's literally going to be earning a few percent, but it's designed to prevent you from taking out debt and paying interest. I'm going to jump to the other side. The far right is your wealth building accounts. That's your 401ks, your IRAs, your long-term investing. Anything you have is for retirement investing. This money is generally not going to be liquid. You're not going to access it readily. You're going to let that grow for the long term. This is where your money should work the hardest for you. You get your best rate of return here. If you're not invested properly, not getting a good rate of return, and we'll talk about that in a second, you're probably not going to hit your goals. But again, this should be working the hardest for you, making the most money for you, but it's not liquid. The one in the middle, a short-term account, if you have an emergency fund, you're on track for retirement, putting liquid money into a short-term account where we can get a better rate of return than the bank. So we're going to invest strategically so we get a better rate of return, that we're going to be tax efficient. But having those 3 buckets is important. And that middle bucket is things like if you're saving for college, or if you're saving for a vacation or a home, a wedding or a vacation home or a boat or something like that. That's what that one will be for. Any questions on those 3 types of accounts? All right, awesome. So if you flip to the next page, we're gonna talk briefly about debt. And again, if you guys have any questions along the way, just let me know. So just in general, does anyone know the difference between fixed and revolving debt? So generally, fixed debt is like, it has a defined payoff date. So it's auto loans, student loans, a mortgage. You know, no matter what you do, you pay the minimum payments, it's done at a certain time. Revolving debt is open-ended. A credit card, a home equity line of credit, you can pay minimum payments and it could go in perpetuity, it could go forever. So basically, the difference between two debts here, it's basically the exact same debt, one's just revolving and one's fixed. $17,000 at an 18% rate, 18% interest with the same minimum payment. The revolving debt would take 17 years and 2 months to pay off, and you pay $12,500 in interest over that time. Whereas fixed would be paid off in 3 years, and you would pay $5,300 in interest. So I only demonstrate that for the simple fact that revolving is way more dangerous. You probably know people that got into credit card debt and had an issue. I just had a client text me today. I texted them back because I hadn't heard from them in a while. They bought a new house. They hadn't been returning my calls. And I suspected that things went south from the debt perspective because they kind of overbought the house. And she just texted me back and said, her exact words were, we're in a crap ton of debt again. And I was almost embarrassed to call you and all this other stuff. So we'll sort it out. But they started racking stuff up on credit cards, and that's super dangerous. So I try to help people avoid that. So how many in here have heard of Dave Ramsey and his debt snowball? Okay, so I agree. I've coordinated his course several times. I don't agree with everything. His is more of a one size fits all, like a plug and play. You can follow his baby steps. I'm not saying you won't be successful, but it's not tailored to the individual. Not everybody should follow it. Like if I run into someone that's 55 years old and they're behind on retirement, we can't just focus solely on debt to pay off debt if we need to catch up for retirement, things like that. But we, basically the debt snowball process is basically putting all your debts in order from smallest balance to largest, paying minimums on everything, and attacking the smallest debt on the list. Pay it off as quick as you can. It'll be the fastest one to pay off because it's the smallest debt. Doesn't matter what the interest rates are, smallest to largest. Once you pay off that debt, in this particular case, you can see it was several credit cards, an auto loan, and a mortgage. Now that they paid off the first debt, they have $220 freed up in their budget because of paying off that debt. We now take and throw it at the second credit card. 220 extra on principal, so we'll pay that one off a little faster. Once the second debt is paid off, we're going to take the combined minimum payments of the first two and throw it on the third, the car loan, while we're paying minimums on everything else. And so now we're going to accelerate payoff of the car loan. So if we follow that, if they were to do this conventionally, it would take them 23 years to pay off their debt, including their mortgage. It would be $214,000 worth of interest they would have paid over that time. But if they followed this plan, they'd be debt-free in 9 years. I know this particular family used as an example was 35 when they started. They were 44 when they were debt-free, completely, house and all. And so the kicker is they saved $130,000 in interest by doing that. But not only that, once they were debt-free, they started investing the $2,720 that was going to debt payments, and it turned in $2.4 million at retirement. It will, not yet, but it will. It'll be roughly $2.4 million. So simply put, this particular family, it's not always the way it is, but all we told them was like, they were in that situation where like, just attack the debt, knock it out really quick, and then we're going to invest because it's going to put you on track. So we're going to free up all that money. The one thing that I do with most clients and most families is we do the consumer debt first, then we run numbers to say, should we pay off the mortgage or should we invest? If I have someone that has a 2.5% mortgage, if I run the numbers, it's going to be, unless they absolutely want to do it, it's going to be silly to pay off the mortgage because they could be investing in the market and making way more than 2.5% than what they're paying in interest over here. So once you pay that on the mortgage, that money's gone. It's never earning for you again, but we can invest it elsewhere. Any questions on that, on the debt stacking? So this is what my wife and I did. We were done in 2 years. Now that's not counting our mortgage because we have a very low interest rate. So we're not paying that off and we don't plan to stay there forever. So we're not paying that off early, but we paid off auto loans, student loans. I think that's all we had. Bunch of auto loans and student loans. We paid them off in 2 years doing it just like this. So if we flip over to page 15, Anyone in here ever heard the rule 72? No? Oh, one, okay. I usually have at least one in every group. So this was the most compelling rule that I learned when I started in this business and started researching this sort of stuff. What the rule 72 says is if you have a savings or an investment account of any kind that's earning interest, if you take that interest rate divided into 72, it's how many years it takes that money to double. So if you're earning 3%, your money will double every 24 years, 6 will double every 12, 12 every 6, etc. This is extremely important because I run into people all the time that are saving diligently, but they're not getting a good rate of return. They're overpaying in fees, they're overly risking the market, they don't have a good investment mix. I'm 42. If I'm earning 3%, how many more doubling cycles do I have in my life? I got 2 if I'm lucky. So we want to get, most people are like, well, you know, if I invested 10,000, I'll actually use this example here. If I invested $10,000 at 3%, 48 years later, it's doubled twice to 40 grand. If it was 12%, if it was earning 12% in 48 years, it's 2.5 million. I've never run into anyone who'd rather have 40 grand over 2.5 million. It's just, how do I get on that side of the chart? So I teach 5 fundamentals. I can go over those right now briefly. Everybody is different and it's tailored, but every single client I sit down with, I go over these 5 fundamentals. I tell them right up front before we even look at statements, and I tell them if we're not doing these, first thing we're doing is we're fixing this because we need to do these 5. So the first one is the discipline strategy. The vast majority of people I meet with don't have a strategy, or their advisor has a strategy, they have no clue what it is. So we first want to develop a strategy, but then we want to be disciplined to it. There's 2 rules when it comes to discipline. Don't freak out when the market's bad. Don't get greedy when the market's good. So right now, I actually had an appointment yesterday with a current client, and we were talking about let's not get greedy when the market's good. We had a ton in technology. If anyone follows tech stocks, they are up all but over the last year, they were up 40%. Up until we had a little bit of a dip here recently, they were up almost 50%. So they're making really good. So back down, we want to balance and spread things out, which leads me to my second fundamental is diversification. You probably heard that. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. I just met a client that has got an inheritance from his mother. They have $900,000 and it's in 2 companies, Apple and MasterCard. I said, you made very good choices when they bought, or they made very good choices when they bought. However, Apple is getting hammered right now. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to that. Just the last 2 weeks, Apple's gotten hammered. So they're tired of the market. Number 3 is dollar cost average. In essence, sleep away every month. You'll make things, buy stocks or whatever you're purchasing and investing in at a cheaper price, and you're going to make more when it rebounds. I always say that the investment world of the stock market is the one place on earth that people don't want to buy things on sale. And anybody in here that's like a bargain shopper, good with coupons? My wife is a very good bargain shopper. Most people, the vast majority of people, do not want to buy stocks on sale. When the stocks go on sale, when the stocks go down, they run for the exits. But it's the buy low, sell high. So we want a dollar cost average because we don't know when the market's going to go up and down, but if you're putting money away every single month, you're going to make more money long term. Number 4 is domestic focus. I'm somewhat unique in the financial world for this. I very rarely want to invest anywhere in international markets. The reason is if I look historically, the US has beat international markets for decades. And if I had 2 companies, they made a similar product, they operated similarly, one was in the US, one was in Russia, who would you feel more comfortable investing in? Everybody I ever talked to, all my clients that I ever talked to about that, they say the US. So we focus on the US. It's not that we don't have nothing international, because it's a global economy and it's hard to avoid being international, but it's a very small percentage. So we focus domestically. And then last but not least is my favorite is dividend reinvesting. So you guys will appreciate this. I like to invest in stocks, or at least a chunk of the portfolio in stocks that pay a dividend. So they buy more shares and reinvest the dividend on their own. I look at it like a rental house. If I buy a rental house, I'm going to be getting cash flow off of that. Maybe I buy more rentals, but the dividend stock, actually, it's like it buys me more rental houses. So if I get a dividend that buys me 3 more shares of that stock, I'm now earning dividend on 3 more shares. So my dividend went up and my value went up. And that's even better when the market tanks. I love being in dividend paying stocks when the market tanks. When 2008 happened, do you think Warren Buffett sold any of his Coca-Cola stock? He didn't sell a single share, but he earned a ton of dividend when the market was down 40%. And I saw him in an interview where they asked, how much did you lose in 08? He said, I didn't lose a dime, I actually made money. And the guy was like, how more did you make money in 08? He said, I didn't sell anything, I bought more. So holding on is going to be your best option, but dividend paying stocks make it even more valuable, because when you're invested and they're paying you to stay invested, people stay invested. So even when the market sells off, they don't go down as fast. So that's the 5 fundamentals, kind of a crash course in those. But going back to the rule 72, if you're in debt, this is working against you. We just talked about debt. I am not a big fan of keeping a lot of money in banks. Most of my clients, if they have a significant amount of money in banks, we're moving most of that out, and we're just keeping enough there to be maybe a small emergency fund and pay bills. The reason I say that, and I won't go down a rabbit hole here, but I don't trust banks. Their balance sheets are not great. It's not that they're bad. I'm not saying that they're all going to go out of business or anything like that, but I prefer to have my money outside of a bank. One of the biggest reasons is banks can commingle funds. If you guys ever heard that term of commingling? So if you put money in a bank, it all goes in one pot. The bank's money, the investor's money, the depositor's money, everybody's money is in one pot. So like Silicon Valley Bank, the reason that's an issue is because when the bank goes bankrupt, everybody's money is at risk. So things like FDIC has to step in. But if you invest in, say, a mutual fund company or an investment company, they have to segregate their funds. They have to keep business or company funds and investor funds separate. So there's an extra level of protection. Plus, in the banks, we're generally not earning a ton. Right now, interest rates are up, so you're getting a little bit better rate of return. But if you put $10,000, let's just say in a CD at the bank and it's earning 3%, you can obviously see how it would grow if you kept doing that year over year over year. But what's the bank do? They go loan it out in a mortgage for 6%, in a personal loan for 12%, a credit card for 24%. And they're earning these numbers out here and they're paying you this. So I want my clients to personally invest in the market, or personally invest in areas where they'll make that rate of return instead of getting kind of a little bit left over from the bank. Any questions on the rule 72? That was just that was super compelling for me to start saving and investing, because I looked at I did the math and I thought, not only do I need to start investing now, but I need to get a good rate of return, because it'll change everything. So time, like I mentioned, is your best friend. So if we go to page, we'll do 17. At the very bottom of page 17, this shows if you wanted to save $1 million by age 67 on the left-hand side. If you started at 25, you'd have to save $177 a month. If you waited 10 years and started at age 35 to get $2 million by 67, you started at 45, you can see it's 1,200, and 55, it's almost $4,000 a month. The reason I show that is simply for the fact, so that's why I'm not a big of a fan of, if we can invest while attacking the debt, we'll do that. Because if we focus just on the debt and it takes us 5 years, that's 5 years we never get back to earn compound interest. Any questions on that? Okay. Any questions before I move on too far? Awesome. You're either doing a really good job or a really bad job. So go to page 21. Here we will talk about, they originally, we're going to call it death insurance. It didn't market real well, so they called it life insurance. I am, for lack of a better term, I'm a unicorn in the industry when it comes to life insurance as well. How many of you guys have seen on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, things like IUL life insurance, cash value, indexed universal life? It's all over the place. And actually, if your phones are sitting here, I probably just changed the algorithm, so now you're going to see a bunch of it. Because they're probably listening to me. I'm a big advocate of term insurance only, life insurance that is. Buying term and investing the difference. The reason I say that, and I'll go into a little bit more detail here in a second. I've done this 10 years. I've never once run into a scenario where a cash value policy ended up better off than buying a term policy and investing the difference. Two main reasons. Cash value is much more expensive per dollar of insurance than term. Term is going to be the cheapest life insurance you will find. So we want to get cheap term insurance and then invest the rest and build assets outside of that. Cash value is somewhat limiting. It's more expensive, so you may not get as much coverage as you would want or need because most can't afford it. There's a lot of fees involved and stuff that I won't get into. The rate of return within cash value generally grossly underperforms the market. Most of the time they sell it because they say it's tax-free. Life insurance is tax-free. But every scenario I've ever run, we end up way further ahead by investing personally and just getting term insurance. So I would rather have, well, I won't say this. I'll ask you guys, you'd rather pay no taxes at all or have more money after taxes? Because every scenario I've run, they have more money even after we pay taxes than what we would have in the tax-free account. So I don't want to pay any more to Uncle Sam than I have to. But I mean, you guys know in the industry, and if you're making money, I mean, real estate investors, they understand, they do 1031 exchanges to avoid taxes and all that sort of stuff, but generally they're selling properties, they're paying capital gains on it. They understand that, they just manage it. So I don't like paying taxes, but I would rather end up further ahead. So that's one reason. The second reason is I'm a believer that you don't need life insurance your entire life. For the specific example that your need is higher early on, you have kids, debt, mortgage, that sort of thing. And your assets are lower, you haven't saved a ton yet. But as time goes on, if you're on a solid plan and you pay off your debt, you pay off your mortgage, you're saving and investing, in the future, if your kids are growing moved out, if your debt's paid off, if your mortgage is paid off, and you have $1 million, $2 million in savings and investment, would you need life insurance at that point? I would argue you don't. You pass away, they're going to inherit what you built. So we bridge the gap just from now till that point in time where you're self-insured or you're financially independent. That could be 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So I'm a big advocate of buying term, investing the difference. Very few other advisors that I'm aware of do that. They sell other cash value type products. And to be totally frank, I'm life insurance licensed. It's a very small part of my business. I could go sell cash value life insurance and probably make 5 to 10 times more money because it pays a lot more in commissions to the agent. I could make more, but I don't do it because I don't think it's right for the client. When we got married and we sat down and started going through all this stuff, my wife actually had it. We cashed it out. We used it as part of the down payment on our house, and got term insurance. And now we're investing, and we're way further ahead than where we would have been. So, any questions on life insurance? Not everybody needs it, and you don't need it your whole life. That's just what you need to keep in mind. Just sitting down and figuring out, do I have a need that if I die tomorrow, is there someone who will be financially devastated or financially in trouble if I pass away tomorrow, my income stops? If that's the case, you probably need it. If that's not the case, then you don't need it. Any questions on that? Again, the least sexy topic in all of finance, so it's not a fun one to talk about. There's a couple of examples in here I'm not going to go through that compares term versus whole life. If you jump, actually, I'm going to skip some of these because I handout that I gave you guys. Page 35, just a brief overview. Is there any, you guys, I'm just curious, how many of you guys invest in some sort of retirement fund? Okay, awesome. I found that a lot, they're afraid of when the market falls, everybody looks at it as a loss. Just like real estate, there's market fluctuation and there's market loss. Market fluctuation is when the price of the asset goes up and down over time. It's going to happen in any asset you own. Loss is when you sell it for less than what you purchased it for. So differentiating between market loss and market fluctuation is a big deal. But the reason I show this is because, and this is actually low, because of the period of time they took this. They took it at the end of 2022, which I hate when we redid this that they took the end of 2022, but it is what it is. But they went from 92 to 2022. If anyone remembers 2022, the market was down roughly 20%. So it's showing the S&P 500 over that period of time averaged 9.64. Since its inception, the S&P 500 has averaged over 10%. So usually this is an updated one, but usually this is 10 point some odd percent. But because of 2022, it's less than that. But you're going to average 9 to 10, 11% if you're invested in just the S&P 500. So I always like to illustrate that bonds are okay in certain instances, but again, they're going to underperform. what stocks would. I'm a very big advocate, even in retirement. Another area that I'm different is even in retirement, I keep my clients relatively growth oriented. The biggest reason is back before when financial advisors were planning for retirement, most people worked till mid-60s and average life expectancy was early to mid-70s. So you were figuring on 10, maybe 15 years of retirement. Today, we got to figure for 20, 25, sometimes 30 years. I mean, if a couple, a husband and wife, hit age 65, there's over a 50% chance that one will live to 90 right now with life expectancies. So we're going to have to create probably 30 years of income for that household. So I tend to stay more growth oriented. I should have brought it along, but I have a little breakdown that shows the Big Mac in 2002 cost $2. In 2012, it was $4. In 2022, it was $6. So it tripled over a 20-year period. Then I also put right next to it McDonald's stock. It went from $16 a share to $267 a share, and the dividend went from 24 cents a share to $6 a share. So if we want to keep pace with cost of living rising over time, and I'm not saying that we're going to have to just focus on McDonald's, it's just an easy example. But if we want to keep pace with that, we want to be invested more in stocks than we do bonds. Bonds are going to average 2, 3, 4%, depending on where we're at. And we're going to maybe keep pace with inflation. That's just about it. And so we want to outpace that at least. So the last thing I'll go over here, and then I'll open it up for just general questions. This little sheet that I gave you guys, because you guys, like I said, realtor. So starting a business myself, I researched this to find out the best options for the individual when you're investing for retirement. I always tell everybody there's 3 ways to build wealth. If you look at anyone successful in the country, there's 3 ways: the stock market, real estate, and a business. And I prefer that if my clients are willing or able to do all 3. So I'm not going to tell someone to sell their real estate to invest in the stock market, unless there's something specific and a reason that they need to. I'm not, sometimes I have clients that come in, they have a lot in the stock market, I can help them manage it. They want to divest out elsewhere. So they look into real estate, they get rentals, they do something like that, or they start a side business that they know they're going to sell. But there's 3 ways to build, those are the 3 main ways to build wealth. But within that, so the stock market side of things is where I come in. There's really 3 main options for anybody who's an independent contractor. That's going to be a SEP IRA, a solo 401k, and a Roth IRA. How many are you guys familiar with the differences between those? Okay, some are. Okay, so just full disclosure, the vast majority of my clients have a SEP IRA. Some of them have a solo 401k that are independent contractors. And then if they're able, they do a Roth. The biggest annoyance with a Roth, I love the Roth because it's all tax-free growth, a huge tax advantage in retirement. The only bad thing is they cut you off if you start making more income. So it's right, this is for 2024, I believe. The household I know is 230, but single is 140 or 130, 146. So if you cross over 161 as an individual, if you file single, if you make more than $161,000 in a year, you can't contribute to a Roth. If you make more than $240,000 as a couple married filing jointly, you can't contribute to a Roth. I never understood that. You can only put $7,000 a year into a Roth. So why it matters if you make $10,000 or $10 million, you're capped to what you can put in, but they cut you off from an income perspective. So the Roth I love because it is after-tax dollars. You're not going to get a tax deduction, but all of the growth from now to retirement is tax-free. So we can manage your taxes in retirement, and you're not going to pay any tax on all of the gains. If you invested in it for 20 plus years, you're probably going to have about 60 to 75 or more % gains. That all is tax-free. So that is a huge benefit. And a side note, the IRS is still working out the details, but they did pass a law that you should be able to contribute to a SEP on the Roth level now. It's just we're waiting on the IRS to give us guidance on how to manage that and file it. But a SEP IRA is like a traditional IRA or a traditional 401k where it's pre-tax money going in, so you get a tax deduction for contributing. It works very well for small business owners and independents because for me, at the end of the year or early in the year for the previous year, I can talk to my CPA and tell them, hey, how much can I put in total, or can I reduce my taxable impact by throwing some money into my SEP IRA? And so I'll talk with them at the end of the year, and if I can, I'll throw $5,000 into the SEP IRA, as long as I don't max it out. You basically can do 25% of your compensation up to, in 2024, I believe now it's 69,000, it was 66, yeah, 69,000 for 2024. In total that you can put into that, or 25% of your comp, whichever is less. So most people fall under the 25% comp calculation. If you're going to do that and you are fully self-employed, you need to talk to a tax advisor before you determine how much you can put in total. It is a very complex calculation for a self-employed person. I don't tell my clients. We go to a CPA and we have them tell us, because taxes is a moving target. I don't want to get them in a bad situation. But I'm just curious, how many of you guys in here use a CPA or a tax advisor to do your taxes? If you don't, I would highly recommend you do. They'll be worth their weight in gold. They will make you more money long term. So I do highly encourage that. The solo 401k is similar to the SEP, but some situations it makes more sense that you can contribute more if you're looking to max it out, because you can contribute as the employer and the employee in different ways. Plus, there's a catch-up amount after you hit age 50 that allows a lot of people to put more money away into a solo 401k than they could put into their SEP IRA. So we either switch them over, or we just open up a solo 401k so that they can contribute more. But that's more along the lines of someone who's looking to max it out. If they know they're not going to max it out, usually we use a SEP IRA, because there's a little bit more that goes into a solo 401k from a business standpoint, a reporting standpoint, and those sorts of things. So it's a little bit more complex. Any questions on any of those? Just out of curiosity, does anybody contribute to a SEP or a solo 401k? No? Anybody to Roths? Okay, awesome. Go ahead here. Any questions on anything as a whole? Like I said, I talk fast. It's a lot of information in a short amount of time, but I hope that was helpful. Any questions on anything? Even on the market? We are in an election year, so can't guarantee anything. Questions? Good.
If you were to put a dollar amount on how much you personally have put into investments, like you've been doing this for how many years now?
As an advisor?
Investing for yourself.
Oh man, that makes me think back. So when did I start a 401k? So I've probably been putting into a 401k just shy of 20 years.
Okay.
17-ish, 16, 17.
Okay.
I've been putting away in a 401k originally, but when I left there, I rolled my 401k out to an IRA, and I personally put money in a SEP IRA. I have one employee. Side note with that is the key also with a SEP IRA. If you have employees or you plan to hire employees, a SEP might not be the route to go, because whatever you're putting into the SEP percentage wise, you have to put in out of your pocket for your employees. So I have an office manager. I put 10% directly into my SEP every single month for whatever I get paid. So I have to put 10% of her salary into a SEP for her. And I don't mind doing that. It's a perk. And then at the end of the year, if I want to dump a big chunk in and it brings me up to 20%, then I got to put a big chunk in and bring her up to 20%. So it's an extra burden. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I do 10% out of everything. And the reason I do 10% is because of that 25% calculation and that maximum of 69,000. I just don't want to hit that. I by accident have to yank money back out. So I just do a smaller amount, so I know I'm going to have a chunk in there at the end of the year. I top off whatever I want to do. So, and I unfortunately we're priced out of doing. My wife and I are priced out of doing Roths, our income wise, so we can't do Roths, which is really annoying, but is what it is. There is an option that you can do. It doesn't make sense for everybody. Has anyone ever heard of a backdoor Roth? So I have several clients that it makes sense to do a Roth. They make too much money. We actually will dump the money one time into each year, dump it into a traditional IRA, immediately convert it to a Roth IRA, pay the taxes on it, and they can fund it. But we have to do it all at one time. We can't do it every month or anything. It's got to be one time. And literally, I put it in there the next day it goes out, because I don't want any gains. I don't want any fluctuation. It's literally into the account and straight to the Roth. So we can do that. Now, we can't always do it. Again, that's something I talk with the CPA or tax advisor to make sure that they can do, because there's some complexities depending on what other accounts they have and so on. The IRS makes it very difficult. I probably will never be president, but if you ever see me standing on stage one day, I tell you, I will be advocating for either no income tax or a flat tax, like 10%, doesn't matter who you are, corporation, self-employed, employee. At the end of the year, you write down how much I made times 10%. How much did I withhold? That would be how I would do it, rather than 18,000 or 1,800 pages of tax code or whatever it is. Why CPAs? Because I do not want to know all that stuff. I know what I need to know. So, any other questions? Market.
Financial advisor, how does that work?
Yeah, so what I generally do first is I want to sit down and have more of an exploratory meeting to see if it does make sense to work together. I don't charge anything to sit down and do a plan, but we'll sit down. It's 2 appointments. First is information gathering. I'll do research, lay out a plan. We'll sit down, we'll go through the plan and decide if it makes sense to work together. If we work together, most people ask, how do I get paid? He only is like an attorney. They charge for their time. They'll charge to do a plan. They charge every time you meet, strategy sessions, and sometimes have an annual or a monthly fee to be their client. Fee-based are paid by the companies they represent. I am fee-based. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. Find someone you know, like, and trust that generally shares your values, and go from there. So in essence, if someone works with me, if they decide to sit down, they need life insurance, or they want to open an investment account, or they have investments that we roll over, you pay no additional fees to go through me. Let's say Fidelity is a company I work with. Let's say you want to use Fidelity. If you went and did it all on your own, you pay the same fees as going through me. Fidelity pays me on the back end for being the advisor on the account. So I preferred it that way. Again, I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. I know people in both sides of that coin. If they're fee-based, if you're looking for, fee only, basically what they're going to do is they're just going to charge you, and they're going to sit down, they're going to help you build a portfolio, and you're going to go back to them anytime you want some advice. Whereas for me, my clients, when they work with me, we're building. I think the biggest key, probably I don't want to say the biggest differentiator, because there's people out there that do it, but one of the biggest issues in the financial world is lack of communication. My clients hear from me every 90 days at a minimum. And it might not be me, it might be my office manager, it might be an email, it might be a check-in, but you'd be amazed at how many times I go to someone's house. There's been times I've walked into someone's house for a review and there's a new baby there, and I had no idea that the baby was born. So then we're adjusting beneficiaries and other things. And sometimes I've walked into the house and there's been a divorce. It's only one of them there, and I had no idea. So now we got to make changes. So if I'm not in constant communication, I'm never going to catch that stuff. And if we're not constant communication, the market changes, they're never going to know that stuff. So to answer your question, it's just the first step is just 2 appointments. First appointment, it might even be 1 appointment. If we sit down and it's not something I can bring value, I'll send you to someone who can. I'll try and refer you to someone who can. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Good. All right. Well,
Awesome.
feel free. I actually should have had you guys get it up, but feel free to grab pizza and stuff. I'm gonna leave all that here: pizza, chips, drinks. Even got some peppermint patties. They're always nice after eat. Very refreshing.